Joe Douglas does not have an easy task ahead of him. The New York Jets general manager in his first official offseason as the general manager will have some tough decisions in building up an offensive line and trying to find pieces to a defense that desperately needs a pass rusher in depth after a lackluster 2019 season. But the good news for Joe Douglas is that he will have $65 million in cap space. With that in mind, here are 5 New York Jets who could find themselves on the chopping block before the 2020 offseason. The first Jet on the chopping block, cornerback Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson has become one of the biggest free agent busts in franchise history. The team thought when they invested $72 million into Jermaine Johnson, they were getting a true number one corner in his prime. What they got was a corner that in 2019 was eventually benched and put on the IR just to not be on the field. Ouch. While Mike McCagnon has received his fair share of criticism for his Jets drafts, we can't forget about how bad some of his free agent signings were as well. Johnson will be a costly cut for the Jets with $12 million of dead cap space for next year, but the good news is by cutting him before free agency, the Jets will get an additional $3 million of cap space and of course void the last 2 years of his costly contract. With it clear that Jermaine Johnson has no ties to this coaching staff and this front office, it's just better to move on from him and take that $3 million of cap space and invest it into a low tier, maybe even a veteran minimum free agent. But either way, even saving $3 million to the overall cap hit could help the Jets get a valuable piece for the upcoming season. The next Jet on the chopping block would be Bryan Winters. Now, Winters is one of the harder ones because he's at a position of need. He's an offensive lineman, and it's clear that the Jets need as much offensive line help as possible. And while it would be attractive to try to bring him back, there's multiple reasons why I can see the Jets moving off of Winters. The first is that the Jets can cut Winters with no cap penalty and save $7.2 million, which is an attractive amount for a general manager who could try to lure a higher piece offensive line in free agency this offseason. The second, Joe Douglas doesn't have anything invested in Bryan Winters. He didn't draft Winters. And because of that, he might not think he's a big piece moving forward, especially fits what he's looking for in an offensive lineman. And finally, the injury concerns. Despite his age, Winters has only made it through 16 games once in the past 4 seasons after signing his big extension. With injuries adding up, including only playing in 9 games this past season, it doesn't make sense for the Jets to hold on to an offensive lineman who might not be in the new plans of the general manager and could use that cap space to get a big fish and a big offensive lineman in free agency this offseason. The next Jet on the cutting block would be Avery Williamson. Now, this is another one, seeing that Williamson is a talented player. But the problem is he will be 29 coming off an ACL injury, and the biggest problem is the Jets are already paying CJ Mosley a massive contract from last offseason. One of the bright spots from this past year was finding that the Jets do have some decent middle linebacking prospects, and with them being a cheaper option, it doesn't make sense for Williamson to stay, especially with such a large cap hit. Don't forget, this could be a great tandem with Williamson and Mosley, and we've never really seen it before, and it could be exciting to see what this middle linebacking core could do. But here's the issue. The Jets need to allocate resources to other areas of need, such as offensive line, pass rusher, wide receiver. There's so many holes on this team that investing in the middle linebacking core, especially when you're paying a middle linebacker the highest salary at the position, doesn't make a lot of sense to keep Williamson. And another interesting note is the Jets were looking to shop Williamson even before the regular season last year and before his injury. Reports came out that the team was actively shopping him in the preseason, and it would just make sense for the Jets to save $6.5 million despite a $2 million cap penalty to move off of Williamson. Do I think the Jets could maybe hold on to him through training camp and try to sell him and maybe get some good draft picks eventually? It's a possibility, but if the Jets see a big free agent or free agent pieces that they really want this offseason, moving off of a linebacker with an ACL injury, especially when they're already paying a linebacker the highest salary in the league at the position, just makes a whole lot of sense. The next Jet on the cutting block would be Quincy Enunwa. Now, of all the players on this list, it's clear that Enunwa right now has the biggest issue with the Jets. He was one of the players last year that had issues with Adam Gase in the front office, and seeing that this relationship doesn't appear to be getting better anytime soon, maybe it just makes sense for the Jets to move off of Enunwa. Don't forget, Enunwa has missed significant time the last 2 seasons after injuries, and his extension last year came before Joe Douglas was the general manager. And even it means eating $5.4 million to just get $2.4 million of cap space, at this point, It just might be healthier for the locker room to move off Enunwa, especially for a player that said he is 50-50 on if he'll ever play football again. That's a big if, and with the big divide already with the fine situation that the Jets already had earlier this year, especially with Enunwa posting on social media, it just seems if something goes south with Enunwa this year, it could really blow up in the Jets' face. And while Enunwa has been a productive player when healthy, the question is, when is he healthy? Look, Enunwa could be helpful in Darnold's development, but if there's already a rift between the player and the coach, it might not be repairable. And on top of that, if you're not sure if he's going to even be able to play next year, or you're concerned he can even play half a season next year, it's just time to move on and try to find a younger player, especially in a deep wide receiver draft, that can fill the void. And the last Jet on the cutting block before the 2020 offseason is cornerback Darryl Roberts, and it just makes way too much sense. By cutting Roberts, the Jets would have no cap penalty and save $5.8 million, and Roberts was another corner like Jermaine Johnson, who was a big disappointment last year and even was demoted and only played in 10 games last year. At 29 and a $5.8 million cap hit for a corner who you're, at this point, just hoping to be a productive player, let alone a starter, it just makes sense, especially when the Jets were able to find more competent corners that were a lot cheaper options on last year's team. With the draft and free agency ahead, it's clear the Jets will look to reinvest in the cornerback position, and getting both Darryl Roberts and Jermaine Johnson off the books will certainly help them do just that. Thank you for watching, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest content. And we have a bunch of great Jets content in the works for you, including which pending free agents should the Jets keep or let walk, and of course, multiple mock drafts as we get ready for mock draft season. So if you want the latest and greatest on the New York Jets, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. If there's anything you'd like us to talk about the New York Jets, make sure to mention it in the comments below. But until next time, this is Rich Sports Talk.